Welcome, everybody. We've got a fun new thing, one of these tier lists that's floating around the internet. We thought we'd do Star Wars CCG set tier list. So we have S as the very top and then D as the bottom. I'm joined by Andy. Hello. It's been a while, man.
Yeah, life is just being life, I guess, these days.
Yeah, the ceaseless tread of time just stomping on your soul.
Crushing.
But the way this works, guys, is we're going to put a set, and this isn't necessarily the power of the set. This is how good was it? Was it well tested? Did it have an impact on the game? Is it something you want to rush and buy at the game store, or is this sort of forgettable set? And then sort of the S is going to be these are essential, whether you're coming back to the game or you're just like, these are so cool and collectible. They were so influential and interesting. I think interesting is a word I would also use to describe some of these, right? Like the higher tiers are just more interesting sets.
Sure.
They're not so bland. So, Andy, do you want to do the honors?
Like we're also doing just like the main releases, not any of the supplemental products.
So we have 14 here. We did not add in supplemental. There's no Reflections 1 because there's no new cards. So we have Reflections 2 and 3 because they did add premium cards.
Sure.
So, Andy, do you want to do the honors of probably the worst set in the game?
Worst set in the game by far. 1997 Dagobah. Literally ruined the game for a lot of people, right? Like Premiere to A New Hope, Premiere to Hoth, like they all kind of like built on each other, and like they all were designed and tested kind of in tandem with each other so that they'd like work. There were a couple rushed cards, like there's like a bunch of cards that deal with Revolution or like LS or scanning crew grabbers and stuff like that were kind of shoehorned into A New Hope for all the stuff they saw wrong with Premiere. But like when Dagobah comes out, they just like numbers, anger, fear, aggression, asteroid sanctuary, like just God.
I mean, it's just bizarre non-interaction with your opponent. It pushed the game to being way more complicated as well. Then they spent so many sets trying to make it less complicated.
How many cards did they produce over the coming sets all the way to basically the end of the game when they get the defensive shields to fix numbers, right? Like there's so many cards, and it's just like Lightside has 2 characters. You couldn't even like really play them because they didn't do anything unless you wanted to Jedi test, which was just super hard to do. And then they also just gave Darkside like complete outs to Jedi test and broken concentration and failure at the cave. It's like, why even bother?
The only redeemable thing about this is Executor being a sideways card and that being cool. That's the highlight.
There's just so many bad cards in this set. Order to Engage, like much anger in him. Like the list of like cards: Defensive Fire, A Dangerous Time, Voyeur, Visor Vision. Just like the amount of cards in this set that are just absolutely horrible for the development of the game is like the entire set minus like 5 cards.
100%. All right, let's move to the next item on our D tier list, which
Jabba's Palace. It's just like like you can't like non-unique aliens. Like I see where they were going with it. They're either just way too good, like Elams being deployed 3, power 4 if they're fighting an Imperial, Destiny 4, so they work with numbers, or Skirlings, which are kind of like the same thing, or they're just absolutely unplayable, like Weequay Guards and Dictos and stuff, and you're just like, these cards are pretty bad, and like Lightside really doesn't get a whole lot. Like there's like some like weird stuff to do with like Slave Leia and Strangle and Tamtel Screech being an undercover spy, and you're like, whatever, I don't really care, I'm just going to play the better versions of these mains. And like Darkside gets just really good cards like Scum and Villainy, and then it's like impossible to ever infiltrate in Jabba's Palace because they just play like 50 copies of None Shall Pass. And you're just like,
yeah, I mean, this is why they had to have enhanced Jabba's Palace to make it a little more playable and fun by adding in Profit. And, so that's our D tier list. I don't think this is controversial. It might be a little more spicy as we go up here, but
Sure.
Next, we're moving to our C tier.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Cloud City on this one.
Super forgettable set.
Yeah, every time you open a pack of cards from Cloud City, your rare is some red card. Like you never get Boba Fett, you never get Captain Han. And it's like, yeah, they're in there and they're really cool, but you're just gonna get some like weird red card that deals with Weather Vane. And you're like, what? Like, I'm not excited about this. Now, it does have some just fantastic, just battling cards like Clash of Sabers and You Are Beaten and Weapon Levitation and Dodge. And like, so there's just like a lot of good fundamental staple cards in this set, but they're probably all commons and uncommons. And the rare that you're going to get in this pack is just garbage. And then you're going to get a box and it's going to have 60 packs in it. And you're not going to open up Captain Han or Boba Fett. You're just going to get 60 copies of a red card or a bionic hand. And you're just like, how many popping Mads and Belden's eyes do I need? None. 0.
100% agree. I'm going to put the next one on our C tier list, which is Tatooine. This is mostly because pod racing was lame. The small set. I mean, the AIs in Maul, like those are cool. Those are iconic. But I just thought it was kind of a forgettable set as a whole.
Yeah, there's just like this weird combination of cards in there where it's like, if you're not doing anything with pod racing, which if you can pod race, you should pod race. Pod racing is the best thing you can do in Star Wars. But if you're not pod racing, it just doesn't do anything. And there's like all these like weird dueling cards for like Vader and Luke fighting, and you're like, but there's no Vader or Luke in this set. And then there's like, if Rick Olay are in a battle, and you're like, I'm not playing any of these cards.
The tech cards for the really bad objectives, they just should have been a little bit better to make them playable, because they were just enough to make them somewhat better, but they weren't good enough to make them like
except Quiet Island Colony. Keeping the Empire out forever is just really good.
Well, I guess I'm thinking like the Rebel Strike Team one, the A Million Voices, the Blow Up at Alderaan one. But let's round out our C tier with another episode 1. And
I'm gonna put Theed Palace here. I mean, yeah, you get Maul with lightsaber and Qui-Gon with lightsaber, but they were just kind of released with Reflections 3 as tournament foil promos. So like the like flashiness of getting them was kind of lost because they kind of released them early. This was also released like 3 weeks before Decipher lost the license, so nobody played with this set. And it's just kind of like, some battle droids and invasion versus WAP, and like until the players committee came out with like cards that actually help WAP, like that objective's just unplayable. And I don't know, just like every card in this set is just very forgettable.
Yeah, there's like rare battle droids. I'm like, wait, which one is the good one?
Yeah, battle droid ships, and you're like 3B3811 is the rare one, but 3B6292 is the uncommon one. And you're like, I don't care about. I'm never playing any of these cards.
All right, let's move up to B tier.
Okay.
I think, to me, A New Hope is just the start of the B tier. It's a good set. It's fine. It frankly should have just been part of Premiere, I think. But it's fine. Like if you asked me to name 5 cards from New Hope, I'd be like, what, Wedge? What else was there? R2? Yeah, it's Chewbacca. It's like cards that you thought might be in Premiere, but they're in A New Hope. And Death Star, right? There's some notable stuff there. That's why it's not C or D. It's just also it was mostly fixing Premiere and making Premiere more complete.
It's a fixed set, right? Like Grabbers, Quite Mercenary, Udaguda, 3 cards that deal with Revolution, but then it just also introduced its own problems like undercover spies and stuff. But then you get like cards that still get played to this day, right? Grimtash, Monarch, Gick, Hujix, Sorry About the Mess, Sniper, like all these cards are just really solidly good cards for the game. And that's why it's just kind of, it's a B set. There's some really non-useful cards in the set, and there's just a bunch of cards that fix the game. So
absolutely. What else do we have in our B tier? I was gonna put one set on there. I decided to move to A tier just mentally, but I think I'm gonna put Endor B tier.
That's special edition.
Yeah, well, I think Endor to me is.
You put the special edition one on.
Oh, I'm sorry, that was my mistake.
Endor.
I had to grab these images from the internet, and no, not special edition. Special edition is not B tier, but Endor is a fine set. Foils were cool. There were some interesting mains, but largely it didn't really add a lot of like Rebel Strike Team. You can't make it work. Endor Occupation, you can't really make it work. Like if you want to play in a little Endor sealed sort of, or like a contained environment, yeah, sure, it'd be fun to play, but in general, they're not competitive. There was some cool stuff kind of introduced, but I also thought foils were too hard to get, and they foiled some lame stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's some cool troopers that make like route tier operations probably too good. They came out with some like careful planning and combat readiness, which were like interesting starting interrupts because you could start multiple locations then. And like there's like a bunch of cards that are like, that's kind of interesting. And that's kind of what it ends.
They also introduced Insurrection and the Dark Side of Gwyn, where it's just like, oh, now we're just scrapping documents.
Very key cards.
Yeah, everyone's just running. Yeah, everyone's running 6 docking base now. Like, this is how the game is played.
Yeah.
All right, moving up to our A tier. I'm going to put Hoth here. I was going to put Hoth at B, but I was actually just thinking about it a little bit more, and Hoth to me just feels so iconic. There's some cool cards in there. Trample, I still think, is the most interesting card in the game as far as thematic, what it does, removal. Like, I just love Trample as a card. So I was going to be B tier, but I just decided to move it to A tier.
I'm gonna cheat and say it's A.5. Like it's between A and B. Like it's very good for Darkside. Darkside gets 3 incredible locations. I would probably get to the best Darkside location, period. It's hard to play it in later years because docking bays are so much more important. But defensive perimeter is probably the best Darkside site, hands down. And then Ice Plains and Wampa Cave really helped Darkside out at that time. Veers, Blizzard 1, Trample, Blizzard 2, Cabal, Lennox, Tyrant, all those cards are just really very, very good, right? And there's just like a lot of other stuff. Light side kind of struggles. You get Anakin Saber, you get Back to Tank, you get Jaren Webb. Most of the other characters are pretty bad. Shields, once you get to like 3rd Anthology, then Ebo becomes actually playable. Anytime before that, it's not. There's like good stuff going on. It feels a little bit unbalanced that like Darkside's just like way better in Hoth than Lightside is. Lightside eventually catches up, which I think if you look at the game on the whole timeline, Hoth is just a very, very solidly excellent set. But when Hoth came out and you just had Premier New Hope and Hoth, Lightside just doesn't get enough.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Premier to Hoth is a much more complete format. If you want to play early on, like Premier to Hoth is actually somewhat fun. And
I'm gonna say right there that we're on the last week of the 2024 Premier to Hoth Retro League and Premier to Cloud City Modified, where we banned some of the more really abusive cards, is hands down my absolute favorite Star Wars CCG format. Premier to Cloud City Modified is fire. It's absolutely fantastic.
We'll have to talk about that afterwards to figure out. I want to know why. Okay, let's round out our AT here. I have to put Premier here because Premier had so much broken stuff. I understand it's iconic. I understand it's super cool. But Premier to me just had too much broken crap in it that if you play Premier only, it sucks. And also, I just like the initial 2-player set because it's terrible, right? The 2-player set is terrible.
Yeah, Premier only is really not good. But Premier just has the fundamental foundational cards of the game that really last until basically the last year of the game when they just completely overpowered everything. But the first all the way through probably 1995 through probably 1998, even into like Death Star 2 era, like Premiere stuff is like still top of the line. Like you're that Vader, Obi-Wan, it's just really good stuff in that set.
Yeah, it set the tone for the game, right? Things like Rebel Barrier, right? Like being able to interact with your opponent. Like I respect a lot of what Premiere is, but also there's a lot of garbage cards. For 324 cards, like 200 of those cards are unusable. Probably 250 are unusable. All right, let's keep going here with our A tier.
A tier, yeah.
What's that?
Yes.
So Reflections 3 was untested. It's not a super complete set. I think they wanted to do something with upkeep that didn't quite work, but Defensive Shields was trying to fix stuff. It added complexity to the game, but it did try to fix a bunch of broken crap. I think the foils in Reflections 3 are awesome, but that's the collector in me. But from a
gameplay standpoint, man, like defensive shields are so important to the game. They fix a lot of like the original just like 15 shields, and you can only include 10 of them. Like they don't really fix all the problems that episode 1 sets release. Like there's not really a good pod racing shield. There's not really a good Senate shield. There's not a good combat shield, but it fixes stuff like cancels numbers, Brangus Glee and Watch Your Step and all that stuff kind of really get hamstrung by defensive shields and really did a lot of overall good for the game, especially later on once the PC takes over and expands shields. But man, the rest of the cards are just like, what were you guys thinking? Like Lando Scoundrel is Leia Rebel Princess is just like, are you kidding me?
No, I think they thought upkeep was gonna like, oh, this is gonna be expensive. You're like, no, like these are way too good.
Yeah. Blizzard 4, if you've never cast Blizzard 4 on turn 1 to pull out a Lord Vader and flip Hunt down and put 15 points of power on the table for 5 force and flip your objective, you just like, why did you guys print this card?
Yeah, it felt rushed, but it is what it is. Okay, let's finish out our A tier here. Coruscant, the Senate sucks. I'll just say
sucks. Hands down.
I think there's a lot of other interesting stuff.
Oh yeah,
in the set, and also the AIs in this just rock, man. Like if you're a collector, the AIs in it rock. There's some other interesting personalities, the sort of combo cards, combo effects that help free up deck space.
Yeah, when you look at the other combo cards that came out in Reflections 2, like there were some like kind of goofy ones, like Sun's Down, Too Cold for Speeders. Like I get why they printed it, because like there was like a bunch of speeder decks with maneuvering flaps and stuff, but you're just kind of like, it's kind of a goofy card. Or like you have your moments in Yoda's Stew. You're like, why did you get those 2 cards in here, right? And there's some of them. I mean, there's definitely some good ones like Sniper, Dark Strike, or sorry about the mess, Blaster Provisions. There's Control Tunnel Vision or something, right? But like Coruscant was like, we're just going to take the best cards and just put them together. So we're going to, Imperial Rest Order and Secret Plans, mobilization points, and You Cannot Hide Forever. We're just going to put all the cards that you would normally want to start, because we also know that defensive shields are going to come out in a month, and like take care of the rest of the effects that you won. And we're just going to like make your 3 starting effects just so good, because you're going to start with essentially the 6 best effects that you can. Really. And then just like the All Wings Report and Dark Lighter Spin, or Short Range Fighters, or Masterful Move, Endor Occupation, etc. Like all the combo cards are just really good. And then like even just the mains, like Maul Young Apprentice, like obviously just gets completely upstaged by Maul with Lightsaber from Theed Palace, but like that Maul was super good. Like there's just like a lot of really just, wow, this card's very powerful.
And I recognize the Senate was not well designed, but I think the
Yeah.
set as a whole was like moderately well designed, right? Like more so than Thief Palace, more so than Tatooine.
Yeah, I think because I guess the original idea was that there was going to be more of an emphasis of like episode one format, right? Episode one was supposed to be its own tournament format, almost like a type two or standard in Magic, where like
Mhm.
legacy would have been like everything premiere through the end of the game, right? But they were going to try to move to this like episode one only format. And if you do that, then like Senate's not that bad. But when you have the whole game, Senate's just like dumb, really.
Yeah. Okay, let's finish out our A tier here. This is A.5. It's almost S tier for me, but the final one's gonna be Reflections 2. I think Reflections 2 did a lot with 54 premiums or 52,
Mhm.
54. I think that combo cards, using combo cards, I think Thrawn is really interesting. I think Dash and Outrider maybe OP, but there's just like some interesting stuff they did here, and I think it's like a nice format. A
Yeah,
lot of stuff is broken, but in
I
general,
agree. You know, the cards that were like the premiums compared to the premiums they put out in Reflections 3 are a lot more toned down in power level, which is crazy to say because the Reflections 2 premiums are pretty powerful. Like Dash and Outrider is probably the best light side ship. Um, and like Thrawn is very good. You know, Pulsar Skate with Mirax is great. There's some just like Watch Your Step, Agents of the Black Sun are just the best thing you can do for light and dark. So there's some really broken stuff, but then there's just like some cards that are just like, yeah, this makes sense. Like it makes sense to put two interrupts on a card together and make it a combo card. Like this is good, right? There is
yeah.
no try and oppressive enforcement. You always want to have both of them out when you're not playing senses and altars, but you don't want to waste two card slots on it. And if your opponent's like, you probably want oppressive enforcement 99% of the time, but you don't always want there is no try. But when you want there is no try, you really want there is no try. But you never really want to dedicate a card slot to it. So like losing the line of text that capital ships are destiny +1 off oppressive enforcement, completely worth it to have there is no try on it. So like, yes, I agree. There's a lot of really good stuff going on in Reflections too. There is some just very broken things too.
Yeah. All right. We are moving to our S tier, Death Star 2. Besides the ultra rares being a 6 Destiny, Death Star 2 is almost a perfect, set to me. I think the ultra rares being 6 Destiny, it's cool from a visual standpoint, but it just kind of
Yeah,
broke
there's a
things.
little bit of money grab there.
Yeah, I was like, oh, we're gonna force people to buy a ton of packs to get
Yeah.
6 Lukes and 6 Emperors or whatever.
There's a couple of like random cards where you're like, why is this a rare? Like the buddy effects, like count me in, I'm with you too. That's one or whatever that is. Like you're like, I don't really get this. Or like some of the dueling stuff, like Rise My Friend. You're like, I'm
Yeah.
not. But like the fact that most of the rares are like characters and starships is like, this is exactly what we wanted. Like,
Right, and it should have been a revolutionary concept that hey, make more starships and characters, and people will think it's fun to open packs.
right?
Like
That's
it's not.
exactly one. It's a little bit unfortunate that in just like Premiere to Death Star 2, Bring Him Before Me is just so good. And
Yeah,
There Is Good in Him is like so bad because Bring Him Before Me is so good. So it's like, they could have done a little bit more. Like if you're playing just those two things together and you're just dueling and dueling and dueling and dueling, like it can be a lot of fun, but nobody really wants to do that. They just want to sit there and hold Luke and not duel. And then it just kind of defeats the purpose of both of the
yeah.
back sides of the objective. So it's like, you could have done a little bit, but yeah, on the whole, Death Star 2 is just such a great set.
Okay. Final one on our tier list here, Special Edition. Special Edition is so fun, and frankly, I think of it as a soft reset of the game. Right? It's what the game could have been with Premier. Objectives are, I think, a necessary evolution for the game. Maybe a weakness is some of the random operatives and operatives being broken initially, but Special Edition to me is just like the best.
Yeah, it's very good. Really fundamentally changed the game forever. And just, I mean, there's some pretty big discrepancies in power level between the objectives. Like Rescue the Princess and Tatooine base operations are absolutely unplayable, and Hidden Base is very good. So it's like, hey, you're gonna balance those out a little bit better there, but like, I think one of the really big things for me out of Special Edition is the diamond sites, actually, right? Like, it just opened up the game to be able to like play on other areas other than, because when Special Edition came out, like basically other than Tatooine, Hoth, or Cloud City. And it's like, now we can actually go play on Dantooine or go play on Kashyyyk or something, right? And like, so I think that's really good. And they retooled the main characters like Ben Kenobi and DVD lots. And I think you also have to take into consideration the timing of Special Edition coming out. And I know we weren't going to tie it in with supplemental products, but Enhanced Premiere came out like 2 weeks after Special Edition. And so like basically by the time anybody actually played in their first tournament, because it's not like tournaments were online, right? Oh, Special Edition tournament, yeah, sure, let's schedule it for the 30th of the month. Oh, EPPs are also released. Those are like the combination of like new mains plus EPPs plus objectives plus like just felt like a breath of fresh air into this kind of like,
especially after some stinker sets, right? You're coming off Cloud City, Jabba's Palace at that point, which was a stinker, and Cloud City wasn't great. Dagobah wasn't great. Yeah. Like, there's a pretty bad period there after Hoth where you had 3 stinker sets. Oh, yeah. The Special Edition was just this breath of fresh air. It was interesting. You had mains, objectives completely changing sort of how you could play. I like Special Edition. I don't like opening packs of it because I think it's kind of, the polls can be very rough where it's like, oh, your rare is a
Star
yeah, some random snow trooper.
Yeah.
But I would love to hear what people think of our list here. Where would you put stuff? We're going to do more of these lists because it turns out making lists is fun. So we're going to do some other stuff.
Sounds good.
Andy, any final thoughts here?
No, I'd be interested to do one for all of the supplemental products as well.
Yeah, maybe we'll add that in if people like this sort of stuff. But that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for hanging out, everybody, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks.